Turn. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Changing Face of Mining. Happy morning, afternoon, evening. Welcome to the long weekend almost, my friends in the United States. Very exciting for you. My name is Peggy Bell. I am the host of the Changing Face of Mining and Chief Growth Officer of the Femina Collective. We are an organization that radically changes the experience of women in mining. And I'm very excited to have my friends Emily and Kelly on to talk about that exact subject today. Before we start, a land acknowledgement. I am coming from the Mississauga Anishinaabe territory of what is now known as Canada. Its modern day name is Peterborough, Ontario. And I was just telling Emily before we started that I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about as my land acknowledgement, and I will speak to a friend who is Indigenous and is also a member of the Femina Collective, and she brought up a term knowledge sharers instead of knowledge keepers, which I found to be very interesting. Knowledge keepers meaning in her eyes that they're keeping the knowledge for themselves as opposed to sharing it with the Indigenous nations and communities. And so I thought, oh, that's a fascinating way of putting it, because I am a very big proponent of including knowledge keepers or knowledge sharers into mining and how we approach the mining sector, because I believe that their knowledge is as important and as valid as those that are trained through colonial structures. So that is my share. In no particular order, just in the order of my screen. I will start with Emily. Emily, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself today?
Yes, I'm Emily Sportsman. I'm based in Golden, Colorado, just outside of Denver. Within the mining industry, I practice as a geochemist and mine closure practitioner, and I'm the current president of Women in Mining Denver.
Yay. Yeah. And I should mention before we move on to Kelly that both of these women are amazing because they have t-shirts named after them. Emily is a tree-hugging miner. And moving on to Kelly, who likes to put the fun in mining. Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Among other F words. So hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Ward. I also live in Denver, Colorado. For context of this conversation, I occupy the past president chair for Women in Mining Denver. I was president for 3 terms, but I've been active in the organization since 2017-ish, 16-ish, something like that. So it's been a while. Member of Femina Collective, which has also been a really awesome experience. But day job, I am COO of a startup consulting firm focused around mining royalties.
Amazing. Yeah. And that's been so cool to watch that whole venture unfold from behind the scenes. Emily is also a member of the Femina Collective. I'll just throw that out there. So among other F words, Kelly Ward.
We're just put on your headphones. No.
So if the F word does leak out, it's just authentic to who the 3 of us are. So I started talking to Kelly in particular about the subject, it feels like months ago, and it's just taken a little bit for us to actually hit the stage. Both of us obviously working with women in mining organizations, and what struck me at the beginning was how welcoming WIM Denver was to the Femina Collective. I met Kelly at a lunch at SME last year. Well, I guess we met the night before, and you graciously invited me to lunch. And that's how I first met you. And then when Beth and I were talking about where do we want to go for dinner this fall, I said, hey, let's call up WIM Denver and see if we can't talk more about that. And you were so incredibly warm and welcoming to us, and it was an amazing experience. So I would love to hear, we'll start with Kelly. I would love to hear what your initial thoughts were when we approached you and said, hey, let's have a dinner for really cool women doing cool things in mining in Denver.
I think it's exactly that, right? being president of WIM Denver for so long, right? Like you get really great calls and, people reaching out for, be it collaborations or, hey, I'm doing X, can you provide me an audience and all that kind of stuff. But, it was just one of those of exactly how you said it. Great women doing great things, and who doesn't want to know others in that way, and who doesn't want to network in that way. And, on some level, I'm not someone who typically understands a no position first. It's a, try anything, or at least most things once, and see what happens. Right. But I think it's just that at the end of the day, fundamentally, if you are in an organization that says we empower women or we create community or all of those kinds of things, I don't know that, at least in my view, that can ever be quote unquote exclusive. It can have guidelines. It can have, parameters. It can have an honest conversation that says, this is our goal. I'm not, if your goals don't align, okay. But to just have oh, well, that's not us, so no, I just don't get it. So yeah, so we wanted to stack a room of cool people. And what was awesome about it, right? Like through this show specifically, through LinkedIn and all those things, I think a lot of us have at least an awareness of each other, especially if we're active in like kind of the wider community, or we're super networkers or whatever the case may be. So, what was fun about it is it became a chance for a lot of people that had been following each other, aware of each other, to genuinely meet in person, and that's the thing. Like, okay, awesome. Like, let's do a dinner and have fun and see what can come of that moves serious objectives forward. And if they don't, then you met somebody awesome, right? There's no losing in any of it.
Yeah. That's such a great way to look at it. And I think that one of the things that we learned from that dinner is there definitely were ways that we could collaborate. And Emily, that dinner was the first night I met you. And which was amazing because you're so warm and welcoming yourself. I think it's just, I think some ways it's Denver in general is a very warm and welcoming place. And I don't know if that is what you experience as well, but tell me a little bit about how you think, what are the differences and similarities as far as how we can work together that you see between, because you're a member of both. For those that remember that old commercial, I'm a member of the Hair Club for Men. I'm not just a member, or not just the president, I'm also a member. So
I definitely don't have problems with hair volume. Not the club for me. So I lived and worked in Canada for 15 years. I think both countries are amazing. Just to give the context on the warmth, past partner was German, and when we would visit the US, he's like, why is everyone so kind? Like, why does everyone want to talk to us? So there's definitely some cultural differences. A lot of Americans will talk to anyone, anywhere, sometimes when you don't want to talk, which is not infrequent for me. So the two organizations, there's, Kelly was saying, you were saying, Peggy, there's overlap. We're women in a small field. Empowerment is there, but the goals and the involvement within the community have different focuses. So while there's overlap with the goals and membership, I don't see conflict with what each is providing within this space for women in the industry. Right. And before I keep going, does that align or make sense with you two? And can I keep going?
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. So Women in Mining Denver, I've been involved since 2019 when I got back into the mining industry in the US, when we moved back to Colorado. It's been warm. It's been welcoming. It's the first time I have felt what it meant to have a network, People always say, get a network. And you're like, how?
Especially
most professional organizations are dense. They're hard
Yeah.
to get through. And Women in Mining was very welcoming, and it made sense from the word go. A lot of our work is very outward. You know, we're providing opportunities for people who are chapter members, people who are not chapter members and just are interested in the programming that the community is putting out. We're providing volunteers for educational opportunities, grade school, Boy Scouts, at the Geology Museum at School of Mines here in Golden. Very outward facing. And Femina Collective overlap, similar people, but it's about us and supporting each other. And there are programs, we're doing one right now, that are available out in the community. But it's often about what do we need and how can we support each other, rather than let's grow and change the face of the industry on the more public perception, outward facing side.
Yeah. And I think I guess in some ways, the synergy there also is that the more we fix that broken rung by giving women a community of internal connection and internal support, the more we're able to show up in the industry to attract more women to it, really, right? So that's where, at least I would like to think, for both of you, the more you feel supported and strong in this industry, the more you're able to show up for WIM Denver. Right?
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that yeah, okay.
No, absolutely. If I can jump in, right? And I fully agree with Emily. I think the outward versus inward. You know, Femina is in my mind a bit of a mid-career, later career, right? You've been around a little while. You've got some personal goals that are very focused on upward mobility, or your own business, some level of entrepreneurship. It's not to say that also you don't want to bring others along with you, and that's the thing. There's a fantastic support group, safety net there. Everybody's got everybody's back. We're actively seeking opportunities to advance ourselves and each other, in extremely tangible, work beneficial ways. WIM Denver is, I think, much more impactful. To be quite honest and frank, I think it's a lot more impactful for early career members. I think it's a place for those of us that are mid to later career. It's a place of sharing, your knowledge sharing thing. I think it's a place that builds community, both within your actual peer groups, be it you're, similar in ages, similar in years in, there's new moms or moms with teens, there's a lot of different categories there. And it's also a place that for me, I've had a lot of help. I've had a lot of insight. I've had a lot of people's just time that they've given me in the industry. And that's a way to pay that forward for me and take that and push downward. And I think both at the local level, WIM Denver, we're not very, I would say, specific or intentional about it, where WIM USA is and has a fantastic program for this. But it's also just beyond that networking idea and a genuine network. It's a place to find a mentor. And I get a little hung up on mentors sometimes, because at least I had a technical background starting in the industry. And so I think we always view that in the, someone who teaches you how to do your job and the technical work that you do and things. There's a million mentors out there. Maybe you want to, you're starting out with kids and you see a mom who's doing it the way that you want to do it. Like that's a mentorship path is momming, right? It's you've taken a lot of pivots in your career and maybe hard lefts, and what's your mindset and how do you get there? That's a form of mentorship. Like it doesn't have to be so specific. And I think it's very narrow if you're only getting that from your companies. And I think that's something that the WIM organization, both Denver informally and WIM USA formally do very, very well.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that one of the things that struck me in some of our conversations was you hit a certain part of your career. I was talking to somebody else entirely different about this as well. You hit a certain point in your career, and I've begun to reach that, which makes me feel very old, where people are like, hey, are you going to mentor people? And of course, absolutely. And I believe in different forms of mentorship, like you do, Kelly. I believe in reverse mentorship. So what can the young women teach us, and what can, and et cetera. And but also, like, just because I've hit I guess maybe the second half of my career, or I'm seen as being senior, doesn't mean that I don't want to have mentorship anymore. Like, I still want to have it as well. So I don't think that stops, right? And so with Femina Collective, yeah, it is a bit more of a maybe a senior seniority level, and that's unofficially available there, right? Where you can still help each other out in ways that may not be available in other forms, because people are like, well, you're supposed to be the mentor. I'm like, I'm no, but I need it still. I'm not done. So
Yeah.
And bringing on.
Oh, you go.
Thanks. Bringing on, building on that. Femina Collective allows, in my engagement, a different level of expressing ambition than you may feel comfortable at work or in another professional organization. Like, I'm currently trying to transition away from a hyper technical field into a more generalist bigger decision making role. And, sometimes it's not comfortable saying that at your company. It might not be comfortable, like WIM Denver, we're not technical, but I've got a place with Femina Collective to practice voicing ambition in a way that's not just me talking to my spouse.
I've never heard that before. That is a very cool perspective that that's one of the reasons why I enjoy talking to members, because obviously me not being a member, but being part of the organization, I don't necessarily see it the way that the members do. And that is a very cool way that I've never heard before.
I'm definitely senior. I'm definitely in the back.
It's funny, Emily, because we were so aligned.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just saying we were so aligned, because that's really the same track that I was thinking about too, is just what you voiced.
Yeah, that's very cool. I do want to talk about how working in a male-dominated industry, and I know this is a theme that comes up sometimes, is that there is a challenge within WIM organizations, or even within corporations and work organizations, where women are seen to be competing with each other. And I think that is a reaction to, that is a reaction to the way the industry works, right? So we see scarcity because we don't see women a lot of times in upwardly mobile roles, and we're not necessarily supported in that upward mobility to the way that we need it to be. And unfortunately, that can create a situation that is not very positive. And so instead of us building the bigger pie, we're fighting for the same piece. And I think I want to talk about how that is a way that we can begin to support each other more, because that is what we felt coming into WIM Denver, is that it was great. Let's just bake a pie together. And we thought, great. We're not gonna try to eat each other's slice. We're gonna bake it together. Any thoughts around that perception? Like, do you think I'm totally off on the fact that we're pitted to compete as opposed to or how do you see that?
Do you want to start, Kelly?
Sure. I have a lot of thoughts around that. I've been pretty lucky. I haven't really experienced it. I think the industry does contribute to that, right? Because there's kind of that idea of, like, there's that slot for a woman, and so it's meeting metrics in a very arbitrary and sad way that has been done and still being done in a lot of places. I also wonder how much of that is ourselves doing it to ourselves. And coming from someone who I've done a lot of personal work, read the books, had the therapist, done the things to not have a scarcity mindset in general. I think there's influences of where I grew up in that. I think there's influences of, having an engineering degree, being very technical, being very risk focused, risk averse, those type of things. I think that all contributes to it. So, I think there's definitely the industry thing, but I also think we need to be honest with ourselves. And is it the industry, or is it a me thing? Right. But with that being said, yes, wherever it comes from, I think there's times that we've felt that. I think there's times we've been victim to other women, elbowing you in the ribs, stepping on your neck, because it's that one thing, right? When, why isn't it collaborative? Why aren't we, when you reach a bigger space, why aren't you, elbowing around you to bring something else up rather than downward, right? Or climbing over, but it's also one of those that I think, there's the idea of being protective. There's the idea of, to meet my goals, to meet my organization's goals, we do have to be so focused. But using your analogy of the pie, maybe it's a bigger pie, or it's just different pies, right? It's different flavors. Because again, what is your own goals? What do you want from something? Where can you participate in more things but not serve the same roles in those? And you can do multiple things with competing objectives without actually competing.
I like that idea. That's not one way that I've thought about it. I definitely enjoy both a slice of pumpkin pie and apple pie at Thanksgiving, and my favorite pie is raspberry pie. So I feel like that's a great analogy, but I never thought about it how you can do different things in different roles with quote unquote, competing objectives, or how about different objectives, diverse objectives. Because I think that in an inclusion, I'm going to a WIM event next week, but that is definitely a different type of event than I would attend in Femina. And I've also recently supported another WIM group with a project that they're working on by being interviewed by them. And so it doesn't mean that it's just a different way that I interact, right? And support them, recognizing, right, hey, yeah, you're doing cool things too. Let me support you in that while still being over here supporting this. What are your thoughts, Emily?
For me, there's a lot of sports analogies and relationships in this. And a number of people know that I less and less every year, but still try to be a competitive bicycle racer. And, for the last 10 years or so, it's been cyclocross. And there's times where I want to train really hard and just go off, put the hammer down, and take care of myself. And then there's times I ride with my daughter. Like, I can ride the same bike in two different scenarios, and it's not taking away from each other. My daughter will disagree. She doesn't like riding bikes with me. Let's say riding with a work colleague instead of my 13-year-old.
Yeah.
Going back to something Kelly said, and it's a conversation I had. It's a presentation I gave for one of the WIM Denver meetings a year or 2, 3 years ago. And it was talking about this, the shine theory, where we don't have to compete. And the more we amplify each other, the brighter we shine.
Right.
And the analogy, building on this for me was, I've done a lot of bike racing. I've had some success at the national level. At one point I was legit fast. I'm now almost 50. I show up now. But even though I've had a national level podium, my favorite podium was a team relay race where we got my girlfriend on the podium for her first time ever on her 50th birthday. Like when I think about my happiness racing, it was there with Kirsten and Rebecca and Michelle. It wasn't second place at nationals.
Yeah.
There was joy because we were doing it together and we were bringing someone along with us.
Yeah. I think that is like one of my favorite parts about the industry. So the t-shirts I say are a love letter to the industry and the women I work with, and it's so true. And I like it's so cheesy because I tear up every time I say that because it feels just so real to me. But that's it, right? Is that how can you in different capacities show up for each other, and that could be a small group having breakfast at Kelly's place before a conference starts, or a big, huge group together in a room, but they're all different ways of doing, essentially having the same goal as far as how do we show up for each other and ensure we're supported and keep women and high performing talent here so that we can continue to build a better industry. So Hayden Mort has put a comment in, and I actually have to pull up my phone because it cuts it off. So bear with me while I pull it up so I can read it all to you. But I do want to just touch on it quickly because he asks for our opinion on it. So let's see if I can't find it while I do this. Okay, so I got the post. I got my phone. Okay. So he asked ChatGPT to explore synergies between Femina Collective and WIM USA. We'll maybe make it for WIM Denver for this conversation, unless you have experiences in this particular WIM USA. Okay, so WIM USA focuses on professional development, advocacy, and education within the U.S. mining sector, aiming to foster a diverse and inclusive workforce. The Femina Collective empowers women globally through investment education, community building, and initiatives like Project Momentum. Cheers to ChatGPT bringing that up because we just launched it. I'm excited about that one. Encouraging women to become accredited investors in mining. Together, they address different facets of women's involvement in mining. WIM USA strengthens internal industry structures while Femina Collective expands external influence and ownership. Do you think these perspectives accurately captures their complementary roles?
I mean, I think it's a pretty great description, especially of the component of Femina that's outward, right? Because there is definitely an outward facing Femina thing, which is a lot of the focus on the investment and stuff like that. But there is the inward, like actual membership and, you know, the catalyst group and all that kind of stuff. I think it's pretty accurate. You know, I think, you know, I don't necessarily have too much to pick hairs about with it. You know, I think for people watching, especially outside of the USA, you know, WIM USA is a fantastic group. I think one of the cool things about WIM USA, you know, and if I say national, that's what I mean. It's our little, you know, like happy term for them. It really exists to support the chapters. It's more like an umbrella organization. And in recent years, they've really put on amazing conferences and that kind of stuff. WIM chapters are empowered to serve at a local level, right? I mean, again, you align to objectives that are established at national, you know, that's part of your charter. That's all those type of things. But, you know, you can serve your membership in different ways, right? And so you can have certain focuses. I think with Denver, one of our things, right? We're one of the biggest chapters in the U.S., if not the largest chapter. You know, we're a major metro area, right? We're not, you know, a satellite with rural or specific mining communities and stuff. So, and that's the thing. Like our organization looks very different than, say, like WIM Idaho. And I'm not saying better, worse, anything. I'm just saying like very different, serving very different memberships there. But there's the flexibility that those get to exist in that way. And if you're starting a chapter, you're starting it to serve locally, right? And so I think that's maybe just the little thing I'd put about, the plug for WIM USA is that flexibility. And, when you're joining the local chapter, it's a community that's a little more built to serve. It's not prescriptive.
Right. Very cool. Emily, how about you?
I think this is a good time to comment on the growth of women in mining for all the chapters and at the national organization. So I joined in 2019, and I don't even know how we would quantify it, doubling, tripling in student chapters, state chapters, general membership, driven both at the local level and, as Kelly was saying, that overarching umbrella of nationals, especially with the success of the national conference in the last, what are we looking at, 6 years. So there's an appetite and a desire for what WIM is bringing, and during this, Feminine Collective also comes on board. And again, it's overlap. It's not competing. There's a desire to have space for women with different but probably aligned goals, as Kelly keeps saying. I've been in the industry for 24 years, and what I like about both these organizations, WIM Denver and Feminine Collective, is that they're both accessible to people.
Yeah.
And, when I came back to the US and got back into mining, I'm trying to find different professional structures, different professional networks than what I had in Canada, and trying to understand how SME is organized and when their meetings are and which division I want to be in. It's opaque and hard to get into. But through connections at WIM Denver and, a couple of chats with folks from Feminine Collective, they're like, oh, it's this meeting. You want to go to this hall at this conference and talk to this person. So there's a point coming. It's with my next sip of coffee.
Is it that we share information and we don't gatekeep? Maybe that's it.
Thank you. Same effort on complete
networks. We share information.
Yeah. So there's overlapping goals, and Feminine Collective is putting stuff out there for the population, but a lot of it is about ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see women in leadership. So I've had one female manager my entire career, and it was for less than a year.
Seriously, in 25 years.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
wow.
When I'm talking about ambition and leadership,
wow,
I see them, they're out there, but I've never had it as with the direct female leader. So Feminine Collective is filling a role. It's filling a space for me in a very definitive way. WIM Denver is doing that too. It's providing an opportunity to try on leadership. Hey, I kind of like it. Ooh, where else can I apply this?
You're also great at it.
Oh, well, thank you.
I think that's we know it's a male dominated field, but then again, knowing having a different view of the geochemistry discipline, having come from the lab side, geochem and metallurgy are my two primary disciplines that I supported. I could see how that would be when I think about who were the leaders in geochemistry that I know. They're all men for the most part.
And there's great senior professional women that are changing the industry, but they're not often in those direct leadership management roles.
Yeah.
Because they're so good technically.
Yeah. And I think that also this is a bit of a tangent aside, but maybe we can bring it back. But geochemistry or what have you, it's applicable in other aspects as well, right? So you can move geochemistry to an environmental perspective and possibly see more women in those roles, because environmental does. Kelly and I used to work for the same organization at different times. My organization bought Kelly's old organization, but definitely the environmental sector demonstrates more women leadership, I would say, than geochemistry in a mining perspective, hard mining perspective. Interesting.
Yeah, if I can just jump into that. So I was really lucky. My first job in mining industry was that organization that Peggy's talking about. You know, and I was interviewed by women. You know, I was on a team with a woman who was my I mean, consulting, right? Like sometimes your actual manager is different than your working manager and stuff like that. But she was a leader both in the group and someone I worked with on lots of projects. And at some point, you know, she was doing my reviews and that type of stuff. And, you know, before I knew vernacular for it, you know, advocates and allies and sponsors and champions and all that kind of stuff, I also had them there. And so it was a really great organization. And in some ways, right, when I would go to site and work with clients, it wasn't the first time they were working with a woman and stuff like that, right? So I was really, really spoiled. And I can say that a lot of the very specific challenges that women face, I know a lot about them from what I've heard from people, but I've been way more fortunate than some of the people in my orbit that I didn't experience a lot of them. But I can also say I was, what was this, 2017-ish, something like that. The last consulting firm that I worked for, I had gotten into doing lean processes and workshop organization and stuff like that. And so I was invited to go do like a strategic shaping exercise for that part of the group. So mining was a sub portion of it, but it was kind of a wider thing. And I flew in, another gal had driven in for it. So we were same hotel, you know, getting coffee together. And I just have this moment and I'm like, holy shit. I just say it out loud. And she's like, everything okay? And I'm like, you know, I've been close to, you know, I'm more than 15 years, close to 20 years. This is the first work meeting that I'll ever go to that it's 5 women working on something strategic, important, high level. It's only women in the room. I was like, because the rooms that I've been in that are only women are specific to being female, right? Thing like, oh, it's like women's meetings, or like, let's shape this, or it's, you know, extracurricular motivated or something. And she's like, are you kidding me? I was like, well, I mean, you know, mining construction, like it's not, you know, it's not rare by any means, but this is a novel experience. And so, you know, but I don't know that any of us have experienced that in a mining setting unless we've created these spaces like Femina and stuff like that. And just also an asterisk there, you know, to be very specific when it comes to WIM things. WIM is very much encouraging a diverse workplace and things like that. So also always, men are welcome. All genders are welcome. Like there is not a barrier to be there. And I was really excited to bring some men onto the WIM Denver board to prove that out in the commitment that says we want something diverse.
Yes. And can I just say that I do love those men because they also support Femina. It's literally the exact same men that support Femina. And yeah. And yeah, we'll often talk Peter specifically, where when Beth was starting Femina, Peter just started showing up to the quarterly calls because they were open to anybody. And she's like, I have no idea who this dude is, but I'm super happy he's here. So
right.
Which is amazing.
But it's
and
funny
sorry, go ahead.
But it's funny too. Like there was a WIM meeting, a WIM Denver meeting that we had maybe a year and a half ago. It was a great meeting, great content. It was talking about like, you know, how to interview better, how, you know, interview tips, but also when you're the interviewer, how to do that better. Right. Mm-hmm. And fantastic content. So much so that a gentleman came up to me afterwards and told me it was good. And then also had I don't know that I'll be back because I was the only guy in the room and it was uncomfortable. And I was like, well, maybe you've experienced what your colleagues have. And so I would encourage you to stick with it, because, lean into that, because we've had to with zero choice. So,
Yeah, so true, right? We don't show up in the rooms anymore. And again, it's going back to that broken rung piece where we're now dropping off the ladder as opposed to building it back stronger. And I guess that's a good segue as far as building a stronger ladder is just in the last few minutes is how do we move forward together? What are some of those pieces that maybe need to be addressed? And Kelly, you brought up a really good one earlier on, and something that I've done work on myself is, and I actually have a article, not that I wrote, that I'm going to post later today about it, is that examining our own behaviors in how we show up in these spaces, right? So are we showing up with kindness, authenticity, empathy, compassion? Or are there other ways that we're showing up that may not be progressing the roles and the goals that we want? So definitely, yeah, I heard you on the therapy. I'm here for that. I've definitely done way too much. No, I shouldn't say way too much therapy. Now I'm just looking at a different type. So we're going from top down to bottom up now with therapy. And that has been a big part of my own experience is, well, crap, there were days, not days, there were years where I showed up not as I should have. And I do owe women some apologies, because I was that person that was like, you get your own pie. This is mine. So how is it that we do start to move forward together in ways that we can collaborate while keeping our own, I'm going to say missions at hand, because I think it's a collective mission, maybe visions, different diverse visions, not even visions, because then we're maybe like seeing something else, but focus, maybe focus is a good one. How is it that we move forward together, do you think? That's a big question. Feel free.
Emily, I've talked a lot. I want you to go. Remember my thing about being supported by shutting up? Like, this is it.
Some of it, if we're going to stick to speaking about Femina Collective and WIM Denver, we've talked a little bit about we're parallel tracks. Like, we're going in similar directions, but we definitely have different purposes. And while there's overlap in the membership, Kelly brought up earlier, WIM Denver can be an opportunity to try on leadership. So getting there together, I have now become comfortable identifying as a leader. So I can now offer that to women in mining Denver.
Love that.
And I can reach out to women I work with, women I've met through the organization, and say, you've been showing up. You're showing a commitment with your time. Have you considered, like, I can encourage women to try on leadership, committee chair roles, board roles. Sometimes, and because I walk that path of not being confident for way too long and get ready to bleep it out. Telling someone to wait for their fuck you 40s is not a good professional development pathway, right?
No, but it's so true. It happens.
When I'm talking to younger women, I can't just say, wait till you turn 40, it'll all change. That's not helpful. But we can say, hey, I maybe recognize a little bit of uncertainty or hesitation. Try it on. What do you have to lose? And like in a specific work team environment, you might want to try leadership, but it's scarier. The consequences may feel higher. But something like women in mining, what are the consequences for trying it on? And what if you discover something new about yourself? What if it turns out you're a logistics whiz and super extroverted and remember everybody's name and make them feel welcome?
Yeah.
And we can recognize as a leadership skill outside of a technical leadership role. So we can do that together. WIM has provided that for me. Femina Collective is providing that furthered ambition.
Yeah, that's I love that. Very cool. Yeah, and don't wait till you're 40. Seriously.
Wait till you're 40.
I waited too. Don't do that.
Don't do it.
I love that too, Emily, because also, right, the idea of trying on leadership and those type of things. And I also think too, your earlier comments about representation, right? Also, there's different styles of leadership, right? You know, I was at the helm for 3 years. You are doing this now. We are very different people. I love you to death. We are very, very different people. And you lead in a different way than I do. And the organization is better for it. It's better to have the injection of different and new. Your style is fantastic. And that it's back to the same thing. And I think it's kind of my answer to the question, which is the whole theme. That can exist in the same place as me. And we don't have to compete, but we can complement.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just the idea of again, you know, I mean, women are amazing at wearing different hats. And maybe that's part of it. Sometimes it's remembering, you know, where you're at, you know, what meeting am I at? What group am I with? You know, what's my hat here? What's my role here? You know, what's my ambition here? What's the group's goals? You know, all that kind of stuff. But it's that like showing up with your whole self. You know that we're going to go in, you and I are going to go into Femina and say things like, hey, we did this at WIM Denver and it was fantastic. And we want to share this because, you know, it's applicable here. We're certainly going to take things from Femina, and maybe it's, you know, less about objectives, but it's certainly about things that we've learned from women within that, or the way that they lead, or things like that. So again, it's just that whole, I talk in so much metaphor, but I feel like everything lives on like spectrums, right? And it's that whole, if you're at the extreme end of either of them, like somewhere you're missing out on things, right? Yeah. And so it's just that whole, you know, sometimes it is much more here, but it doesn't mean that you can't have the influences of the other things. It doesn't mean, you know, I have to be 100% WIM Denver today. I have to be very focused on WIM Denver today, but I'm going to take all my experiences into that focus. And I think it's just also, you know, the idea again of, you know, scarcity versus abundance, the idea of, you know, instead of being resistant, what if, you know, have my Ted Lasso moment, just be curious about it. Like, you know, what can you learn? What can you do? What can you contribute? And, you know, be mindful of the categories, but also blur the lines a little bit, because more experience, more input, more diversity, more perspective is never going to be a bad thing in these rooms.
Yeah. What is it that Ted says? Believe? Is that the sign that goes above the door?
Believe is the sign, and be curious, not judgmental.
Right. Such a great show.
Oh God. And then shrinking. Let's keep talking about therapy.
Yeah. Okay. So one last question that I never tell my guests before showing up, because I want to know what the real answer is going to be. So Emily said 25 years. What would the Emily of today tell the Emily of 25 years ago coming into the sector? See, look at Kelly gets it. Kelly gets a preview. She gets to think for a second.
Like a lot of women, I didn't expect to have a career in mining.
Yeah.
Even though I went to the Colorado School of Mines, never really occurred to me I'd work in this space. Started my career in exploration for 5 years, and I've been on more the environmental geochemistry for the balance. I wish the Emily knew that she didn't have to be the expert in every situation. I've quieted myself for a long time because I thought I had to be the absolute best. Headline, I was good, but I was never the best. But I still have managed to really do good work within the space. And I wish I hadn't been afraid of sitting in my knowledge and being comfortable with it.
Oh, it's a good one. I like that one. Kelly, what about you?
Oh God, I love questions like this. I love these things. You know, some of it you can take the career track with it, but in general, take more risks, right? Like I was, oh man, I was a born 30-year-old and just very focused, and there's a right way and all this kind of stuff. And it served me well. Like there's the balance that it very much served me well. And I love my life. I'm having a lot of fun. I'm doing really cool shit. And, you know, and that can all be very serious, you know, with a little side of irreverence because I'm me, you know, and it's all those things that got to this point. But certainly, you know, take more risks, take more calculated risks. That would be part of it. I would have liked to have learned a lot earlier in my life too. You can care about the hill of principle, but stop dying on the goddamn thing all the time. Right? Pick your battles. I would have leaned in earlier to knowing the difference between when you really should have permission and when you should be asking for forgiveness, right? Which I think is all leading up to I had a lot of rigidity in my life, and I know now a lot of that was probably very fear-based. And, you know, I'm supposed to do well and I'm supposed to do these things. And there's this very set way that if you do this, you get this, right? And that's fear-based. And so kind of back to the leaning into discomfort, thinking about what if instead of, oh no, and all those things, you know, that we've touched on in meanders. But yeah, I think certainly those are the three that always come up for me. Hill of principle, more risks, and just you know, just embracing failure as being okay, or that it might go wrong, and that I've absolutely got the tools to adapt. And you know, it's the weird stories that are better stories.
I'm getting a little sweaty just even hearing the word failure.
I know, right? And it's funny too, right? Like sometimes I wonder, like, you know, all of us were in a consulting world and came up through that. And there's a lot of pressure there. And, you know, it is if you mess up, you know, that's not billable and you have to fix it and all this kind of stuff, you know, but I also know that I had a personality that absolutely like leaned into that, right? Like that wasn't done to me. It was made for me, you know, and it's like, oh yes, you know, control shit, you know, but again, just a lot more fluid, less rigid approach is what's really, really served me well. And, you know, and it's kind of awesome to talk about your t-shirts, Peggy. I love that I'm the fun thing, because if you know me, there's a lot of fun, but there's also there's the things in life I'm dead serious about, and I can be very focused and very driven and all of those things. But I didn't have the balance, and that's how I bring balance to it for myself, and I'm a better outward person for it. So
I love it. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining me to talk on the internet. It's been a pleasure having you on, and I love that you're part of both groups and that you continue to welcome us with open arms. I'll say us being feminine, but I do feel as though that very first SME that I met Kelly at opened my eyes to the amazing talent that women have south of the border. And I love it down there. I love it. I can't believe I missed WIM USA, the national meeting convention conference, because I will definitely be there next year. I'm pretty sure Beth is planning on attending as well, because we had so much FOMO, because I just think it's a very cool event that you put on that just brings a whole different perspective to the industry. So yeah, so thanks so much for hanging out with me for a bit. I appreciate you.
Thanks,
for the
Peggy. Thanks,
opportunity.
Kelly.
Thank you.
Yeah, love you, ladies.
Love you too.